And welcome to this evening's Master Gardener program on sizzling ideas for cool season vegetables. I'm Dina Henshin, Head of Adult Services at Percival Library, and your host today. Please feel free to send me your comments and questions during the program by using the chat feature, and I will relay them to Denise during and after the program. Denise Palmer is a former Loudoun County Extension Master Gardener who shared her knowledge and passion for the backyard vegetable for almost 15 years with the residents of Loudoun County through countless lectures and activities. Since moving to the Sandhills of North Carolina and becoming an Extension Master Gardener there, she still has not lost her enthusiasm to educate residents on ways to eat fresh by growing your own throughout the 3 seasons our weather allows. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you, Dina. And I'm excited to talk vegetables, especially cool season vegetables, because that means that summer is almost over. So I used to be a really huge summer person, like it's all vegetables all the time. And then I guess when you get a little older, the heat starts to affect you a little bit more, and you prefer to do your gardening in a little less heat and humidity stressed environments. So down here in North Carolina, fall vegetable gardening is really big. And I've actually learned some things down here from the master gardeners down here and from the residents down here that the fall vegetable garden is really one that they highlight down here because of it does get a little hot and actually even more humid than it was up there in Northern Virginia. So we're gonna take a walk through the wild side, and if you're joining me, then you're probably a vegetable fanatic. And so you are going to, you want to do the 3rd season of gardening, which I enjoy. I enjoyed up there. I did a little bit of it, but I'm glad that I have a longer season to do it down here. First of all, before we move on to this whole fall vegetables, what we want to do is we want to celebrate our summer successes. Now, if you're a vegetable gardener, you know that it's August and you've probably had some failures and you've probably had some successes. So I show you pictures of my successes. And at this moment, right before I got online, I was making notes of my failures and what I'm going to do different next year. So this is the time that we sort of, we look at our summer garden, our spring garden, and we say, well, what went wrong? And what should we try different next year? But in some instances, we can't because it's the weather that has played havoc with what it is we're trying to do. And while I certainly have had many successes, my one failure, and it's not my own failure, have been my tomatoes. We had a reasonably cool, sort of wet but not soggy late winter and spring and even into early summer down here. And my big tomatoes were, I think, diseased almost from the onset. I grow my own transplants. I grow all of my own little plants inside, and then I go plant them in my garden. And the one thing I realized that I didn't have was a hybrid tomato. And a hybrid tomato is supposed to be your best bet against disease during the summertime. So I went and bought one of those from a local nursery down here. And I am pretty convinced that that hybrid tomato had disease and introduced disease to my other tomato transplants. So that is my lesson that I have learned down here is try to grow all my own stuff so that I don't have to bring in something from the outside. But other than that, I've had real good success, and I hope your gardens have been successful as well. Here we're almost at the end of many of our seasons. Our things here, I'm about a half zone removed from hardiness zone removed from Northern Virginia. And so a lot of our stuff is winding down now. But certainly I've had good success overall in my summer vegetables and hope you have as well. So let's move into the fall gardening season, because really the fall gardening season here is actually, as I said before, can be a bigger season. And it can be a bigger season because we have cool weather for a longer period of time. And so we don't have to worry about some things. And watering, when you live on a sand pit, which I do because I live in the sand hills, is a huge, huge deal down here because water leaches through sand so readily. It doesn't stay in the soil, especially if our soils get heated up. Now, the clay soil of Northern Virginia, I used to curse that, and I'm sure you may curse it as well, but don't curse it because there are actually worse things. It's called sand. So since moving here, we've been here for a couple of years, I've had to learn how to garden on a whole different scale. And one of those is gardening. My landscape beds are in the sand, but my vegetable beds are in raised beds with a 50-50 mix that I bought in from the local landscape supply company. The only thing I didn't figure out was when you bring in that 50-50 mix and you live in the sand hills, once your compost is gone, you're left with sand. So it will need to be renewed with compost every year in order to keep the water in the mix. But with the clay soil, that's a little less intrusive. Once clay is waterlogged, it takes it a long time to dry out and can actually lead to some other issues, but your water will stay around. The hot sun, boy, does it get hot down here. The sun can be intensive, and even for being the vegetable fanatic that I am, I often think, oh, I'm just going to wilt out in the sun, trying to get everything watered and weeded, looking for insects, and even harvesting my mature vegetables. So I am looking forward to the fall solstice where the sun's a little lower in the sky and I can do a little bit better job of looking after my garden and remembering to water it, which won't be such an arduous task as it is during the summertime. The cooler temperatures actually for some of the vegetables actually make them better tasting as it cools down, and even when we get into frost season, the cooler temperatures, if you get a frost on some of these vegetables that I'm going to go into a little later on, it can actually sweeten the taste. I don't know if you've ever, bought home broccoli from a grocery store or kale from a grocery store. You've made it, and then you realized it's probably your husband or maybe your kids have said, "Man, this doesn't taste good. This tastes bitter. It doesn't taste good. We're not going to eat it again because this is bad." Well, in the fall, if you get a frost on that, it will actually sweeten your flavor. And so, like your vegetable garden where you're growing this and you're harvesting it during the cooler temperatures and even after a frost, even your grocery store produce should taste better, just simply because it's being grown in the circumstances which make it taste better. And then we all have empty space now where we're taking out those things which, they've done their job and now it's time for them to come out. And I hate to see an empty garden bed. It just drives me crazy because I'm thinking, well, I can't just leave that be. Surely there's something I can do. And so I like to utilize empty spaces here and there for growing more produce, which I don't have to go to the grocery store and try to wade myself through. Being a vegetable gardener, sometimes you can be your own worst enemy when you go to a grocery store because you're at the grocery store and you're like, well, this is this and that's that, and none of this looks good. But when you grow your own, it's yours. Better or worse, it's yours, and you're going to appreciate it a whole lot more. And then, as I said, just the pure enjoyment of getting out into the fall weather, the cooler weather, and enjoying your garden before you actually do have to put it to bed for the winter. So what do we want to think about when we're preparing for the fall season? You're like, yeah, I've done the spring thing, I've done the summer thing. Gosh, do I really want to do a third season and have to worry about all this? Well, you don't have to go big. It doesn't have to be a summer garden where you've planted out everything and you've got 8-foot tomato plants and 25 different pepper plants. No, this can be on a smaller scale. And I usually do it on a smaller scale simply because I am pretty worn out from the spring and the summer, but also because, you want to have time to do some of the other enjoyable fall activities. So when we're planning for a fall planting, if this is your first time doing it, I wouldn't suggest going big. Maybe take a space, consider what can be in that space, and then say, what is it that I would really like to enjoy in the fall? But it's also a good time to be clearing out some stuff. As gardeners, we kind of get weary at the end of the summer and stuff dies and we just kind of leave it there. But when you leave it there, what you're actually inviting is the insects to come in and say, great, we have a winter vacation home amongst our dead vegetable debris, which we don't want to have in our vegetable garden. So it's also a good time to let go and say, yeah, the tomato plants died. It's okay. Let's just go ahead and take them out so it's not a continual reminder of what didn't go well. So, now's the time. If you're going to do a fall garden, you need to, start pulling out some things which are done, pull out some things which are diseased and insect ridden, and clear a space for your fall garden. That would be probably your number one activity. We also want to keep harvesting our summer vegetables as regularly because we want to keep our insect activity minimized as much as possible. Because although it's fall, we can have some insect issues in the fall garden because insects like the cooler weather too. Now, my main issues down here as far as summer vegetables right now seem to be the June bugs, which they're just big old flying. It's like a supersized Japanese beetle that just, you're outside and kind of hits you in the head because it doesn't fly very well. But boy, do they like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants. It's trying to keep them off my vegetables. And I don't want them to also lay larvae in my soil. And also the leaf-footed plant bugs. Those are issues I didn't have in Northern Virginia. So I have to learn new ways to mitigate these new insects I have down here. And one way is to make sure that I'm keeping up with the harvesting of my vegetables so they're not over there congregating on my vegetables. We want to weed our garden beds because once again, we're trying to keep the insects from laying eggs, from eating our stuff, and from thinking that our garden is their vacation home for both the summer, the fall, and the winter. So we try to keep the weeds out of the garden beds. And then, you step back and you say, well, what is it I have? What is it I have? What is it I can feasibly grow? Because once fall comes into effect, we have other things. Maybe the kids go back to school, maybe work becomes stressful. Maybe, you have a whole lot of other things to keep track of. So we take stock of our space and then take stock of the space that you can reasonably keep up. Because I say it again, cool season vegetables, fall vegetables are some of the best tasting that you will have through the 3 seasons. And also, if you're not familiar with planting dates and harvest dates and hardiness zones, now hardiness zones vary by where you live. And amazingly, I'm only a half a zone removed, even though I'm 6 hours down the road from what I had in Northern Virginia. So if you would look at a hardiness zone map of North Carolina, there's a little space that zone 7A is 7B, and that's where I live. And at first, when I came here, everybody said you're an 8A, and I was planning for 8A stuff, and it's taken me 2 years to understand. No, you're actually in zone 7B. And you say, well, what difference does that make? Well, it makes a difference because it makes a difference as to how hot it will be, how warm it will be, when your first frost will come, and things of that nature. So I highly advise, if you're not familiar with vegetables and hardiness zones and planting dates, Virginia Tech VCE Guide to Virginia's Home Vegetable Garden it can be a really informative guide. And also review the publication that they have, which is called Fall Vegetable Garden. Now, I will say that with a caveat, because apparently VT, Virginia Tech, is redoing their publications websites. And it took me a day to find these two particular publications. I knew they existed, and so I had to be pretty diligent about finding those. And also, I've sent a handout to Dina, and if anyone is interested in the handout, they should contact Dina, and Dina can get that handout to you, so that you can go through this presentation for additional information, or information that you'll forget, because I'm sure you won't remember it all. So next thing to do, let's decide upon our vegetables. What is it that you really want to grow, that you want to put your effort into, that you have enough space to do, and decide. And we're going to go through the list. Once you get through the list, you can write down a few notes of things that interest you. But also another sort of timely thing is to get your seeds. If you go into your big box retailer, you're probably not going to find any seeds this time of year. A lot of times they're sold out. Now, if the retailers down here have the seeds, they will put them out because fall gardening is a big thing. But in Northern Virginia, when I lived in Northern Virginia, I never ever saw the retailers put the seeds out up there. So that means that you might have to go to a local nursery. Perhaps they will have some leftover seeds from the spring and summer planting, or go online to find your seeds that you want. I always order mine in the springtime. So when I in January and February, when I order my seeds, I say, what am I planting in the fall? And I'll get my seeds then, so that I don't have to scurry around looking for seeds, because I pretty much know what it is I want to plant. Also keep in mind that it is August 1st. And so some things you're just not going to be able to plant because it's already too late to plant. And we'll get into that when we go through the list. A lot of things you can get into the ground, but some of the long-lived, like Brussels sprouts, unless you can find them as a transplant right now, like today, you're probably not going to be able to get them in and get them to maturity, unless your fall is mild and frost doesn't come as quickly as the average frost date says it will. So as we go through, you can just, write some notes down about things that you're interested in growing, and maybe grow some new things. So let's talk timing. If growing transplants, if you're, like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, there's probably a couple others that I'm missing here, cauliflower. If you want to put those into a fall garden, they have to go in as transplants. And as transplants, that means that they had to be started 5 to 6 weeks ago, which would mean, you had to start them in early July. So it's probably too late to get those unless you can get those from a nursery. And it's possible the nurseries up there may have some of those things as transplants. Now, some things you can just direct seed, or just put the seeds into the ground. And again, we'll go through that in a few minutes. But when we're putting something in as a transplant, you have to have the transplant now. It's too late to start them from seed and then put them in the garden, because you'll need 5 to 6 weeks in order to get those big enough so that you can put into your garden. Next, let's talk about the average days to harvest. So we are coming to the end of the season. So we got to be a little bit careful about what it is we're trying to grow, because we've only got limited days now. And when you look at a seed packet, or you're looking online, you're looking at the average days to harvest, or the average days to maturity. It's going to tell you on every seed packet or on every transplant tag, and we're going to want to pay attention to that number. Again, you know, something that is going to mature in November, may not want to pick that variety, because that's probably going to be too late, because we would have already had frost. Something that has not so many maturity dates is really something we maybe want to be looking at. On top of that, we want to put in the fall delay. So you have your average date to maturity, and then we have to put in the fall delay. Now remember, the sun's going down into the sky, sunlight gets less intense, days start to get a little shorter, and we always have what we call a fall delay. Things aren't going to grow as quickly and pop up and be bright and sunny in our garden like a spring garden. Instead, everything's winding down. So our fall delay is always going to be about 2 weeks. So on top of the maturity date, we want to add about 14 days. And that's really how long that plant is going to take to mature. Once we kind of have that information, then we want to count back the days from our average first frost, which generally in Northern Virginia is October 15th. Now understand, it can frost earlier or it can frost later, but generally the average in the Northern Virginia region is October 15th. If you're in an entirely different region, then this number can be different. And so you would count back from that date. So we're trying to figure out, how long is this going to take? Am I going to get this out of my garden at maturity? What we do, we add our harvest time, or our days to maturity. Let's say it's listed as 60. We add 14 days for the fall delay, and we count back from October 15th. So our planting time on something specific would be about August 3rd. So you know what that means. Time to get shuffling, because it's time to get it in the garden. So that's a little bit about timing information. As I said, this isn't spring when everything springs up and you got countless days to get this thing to maturity. Instead, you know, the frost is going to affect, and then the hard freeze is going to affect how long we can realistically get these things to grow in our garden. So let's look at our possibilities. We've got a pretty wide variety of possibilities. So, you know, I've got the broccoli, cabbage, collards, and cauliflower. Again, broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower have to go in your garden as transplants. I've also listed the maximum low temperature. So that's the maximum low temperature that these plants can take before they are damaged. So if our maximum low temperature is 25, then when the temperature goes below 25, we can pretty much say, the plant's going to die. Now, if you're getting that low, you can minimize your damage by having such things on hand as row cover or old sheets to cover the plants when temperatures go that low. So again, broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower have to go in as transplants, and we want to try to get them into our garden by August 15th. And again, you know, we're kind of past the July 1st to start our own transplants. Right now, what we need to do is get transplants from a local nursery. Collards. Now, collards can take a beating with the cold. And down here, they love their collards. They love those collards. The whole November month, I can go drive through our local town here and I can pick up collards left and right because everybody does collards. And it's actually the perfect time to do collards because if we get a frost, it will sweeten the collards and make them really yummy. Now they can go into seeds or transplants. If they're going in as seeds, then you should try to get them in as close to August 1st as possible. remembering that, if we don't get the frost on October 15th, we can extend our season. Or if we're using protection, we can extend our season. And if you're using transplants, then they go in at the end of August. Brussels sprouts, boy, they need to go in the ground like today, and they need to go in as transplants. They are yummy, but they take a long time to mature, although they do like the frost. Love them some frost. Have you ever had Brussels sprouts? It was sweet, and you just knew that they were grown and they had some frost on them, because they're really yummy when they get some frost on them. Now, one caveat with the Brussels sprouts is Brussels sprouts can use all the fertilizer you can throw in that soil. The soil needs to be very rich. So specifically when we're talking Brussels sprouts, make sure your soil is enriched pretty well.
Denise, can I interrupt you for a moment with a question?
Sure.
Somebody said they really appreciated the timing discussion. Post-summer growth, is there anything that they need to do to improve or refortify the soil prior to the third season planting?
And we're going to I have a slide on that.
Excellent. Yep. Nope. We will get to that then. Thank you.
Yes. Everything has its time. And so here's some more possibilities for our fall vegetable planting. If you're a chard person, you can see I've got some time. If you're a kale, I used to love kale, and then I kind of grew kale in the heat too much, and then kind of got, don't like kale anymore. But if you grow it in the fall time and it gets some frost on it, boy, it can be just as sweet as a candy. And I like the red Russian kale. I think it really, really does well in the fall time, and it's really yummy tasting. Now, kohlrabi, a lot of people aren't familiar with it. I love kohlrabi, and the only reason I love it is because I tested it, I trialed it in one of the first fall vegetable gardens I ever did. And I think I love it. It's very mild tasting. Some people think turnips. Kohlrabi to me is like a milder turnip. And it grows a little bit different than a turnip because the bulb will actually grow on top of the soil. But it's yummy. Leeks, if you do leeks, again, you got to set them out as transplants. I personally have never grown leeks. I've never had the space to grow them. But one of those things that does really well in the fall time. I like my lettuce. I could eat a row of lettuce by myself. So whenever I can throw lettuce into the ground, I will. But in the fall time, we can really only do loose leaf lettuce, the bib lettuce, the heading lettuce, things of that nature. We just don't have enough days in the season left to get those things to maturity unless, you're using plastic and all this other stuff. But loose leaf lettuce, like an oak leaf or a deer tongue or something like that, I will definitely throw it into my garden. Now, radishes really need to be labeled for fall in order to be successful. I've trialed spring radishes in my soil before in the fall. They just didn't do well. So if you're looking at radishes, and we like a good radish around here, make sure that you're looking at the description of it, making sure that it's labeled for fall. The daikons can grow really, really long. And again, they can be really yummy when the frost gets a hold of them. Spinach, if you're a spinach fan, good for you. I've had nothing but trouble with spinach. I found that if you're going to try to do spinach, it can be, especially in the late summer, it can be kind of difficult to grow it because the soil is so hot. And spinach can be finicky anyway. But if you're a spinach grower, good for you, because I have not found the secret to that. But again, we're paying attention to a winter variety of spinach. And really with spinach, it's better not to plant it in a row, but it's better just to sprinkle it like fairy dust over your garden bed and then get some soil over it. It seems to do better that way, whether it's spring or fall planted. Turnips. Love me some turnips too. And again, turnips are a pretty hardy little vegetable there. And they can go, you can direct seed them by September 15th, and they're pretty hardy. Garlic. I love garlic. I am the garlic queen. I love it. If you ever come to my house, I'll be the first. Let me show you my garlic. I think it's the easiest to grow of all vegetables, and that's probably why I love it so much. To me, it's one of those plant it and forget about it kinds of crops. We're planting it as individual cloves from a bulb. We're not planting the bulb, we're planting the individual. And what you do is you plant it in mid to late October. And then our harvest time is the end of June or July of next year. So yes, it's a planting that's going to take away from the space in your garden for a considerable amount of time. But I love garlic, hands down garlic. Now, the one thing with garlic is a lot of people get it online through the online seed retailers and stuff like that, and it goes very fast. However, I just ordered my garlic, and I found a pretty readily available supply of it out there. Now, I'm in a more southern part of the country now, so I grow the softneck. I have grown both the hardneck and the softneck when I lived in Northern Virginia. The hardneck tends to have smaller cloves, but it's able to handle way cooler weather a lot better, where the softneck tends to have larger cloves, and it does better the further south you go. But in Northern Virginia, I actually grew both and had luck with both. If you don't want to go online, a lot of people like to go to the grocery store and buy garlic. I tell you, buy organic garlic. Organic garlic, that way you won't have growth regulators on it. And another caveat is always be careful when we're buying something from the grocery store or putting it in our soil. You don't want to bring disease into your soil by buying something from a grocery store. That's not saying you can't do it. It's not saying it's not feasible. I've heard of plenty of people doing it. But I'm always a little like, man, I don't want to get disease in my soil. So I go to the online suppliers to get mine where it's certified virus-free. So here we are at soil. Soil. So again, get that stuff out of the garden and put it away from your garden. If it's diseased, if it's insect-ridden in your composter, don't put diseased, insect-ridden stuff in your compost unless you're a hot composter. Now, most of us home gardeners, we're cold composters. We throw it on the pile, throw it on the pile, throw it on the pile, throw it on the pile. Someday it makes itself into some compost. But if we're cold compost, we're not getting the temperature high enough so that we can get rid of the disease. And insects are like vacation heaven over the wintertime. Let me hang out here because this is all nice and cozy and comfortable. And I'm just going to hang out here until it gets warm enough, and then I'm going to leave your compost bin. So, I'm in an area where we have to burn our stuff, so mine gets put in the burn barrel, and I have no problem lighting a bunch of insects, bad insects, on fire. It's like, I guess, lets me get my revenge against them for doing what they did to my garden. Do a soil test. Now, the soil test that you do is not going to benefit your planting for this fall, but you really should know what pH your soil is and take the recommendations of what the soil test says. And for soil test kits, contact the extension office or get with the Master Gardeners. They can give you soil test kits, and if you have questions, it will help you next season for your garden. I am fixing to get all the soil tests for my garden beds in the fall. Now, down here in North Carolina, it's free, so I can send in as many as I want. And in Virginia, it's not free. So I do an extra special good job of making sure that I get all my soil tested because it is free down here. Loosen your soil. the summertime brought rains, it brought plants. Make sure you're loosening up the soil so it's not compacted. And with clay soil, that may mean, you know, adding compost to your soil to get it so that it's loosened up. And yes, if you grew summer vegetables, spring vegetables, summer vegetables, the soil is now like, oh, please give me a break here. Please give me a break. You need to add fertilizer or lots of compost to your soil. So I like to incorporate a dry, just general purpose fertilizer meant for the vegetable garden. Mix it in with my broad fork, and then make sure I water it in well. Now, because I have sand in my garden beds, I have to add lots of compost. And compost can do it, but if you were growing some vegetables that took a whole lot of nutrients out of that soil, compost may not be enough. You may need to add some fertilizer on top of that. And then what do we got? We're still in summertime, so the soil is still like burn, baby, burn. So we're going to need to cool our soil because seeds will not germinate in soil that's 85 degrees or higher. So how do we cool our soil? Well, you can throw stuff on top of the soil. You can throw burlap and shredded newspapers or other kinds of mulch, even straw, to help cool your soil. And then if you plant seeds, you can actually throw a board on top of it to keep the soil cool, and then keep looking at that board, because once those seeds germinate, you want to take the board off. And you do want to mulch, but we're as long as it's hot, you know, a deep mulch isn't bad. But if it's cold, you know, once it cools down, we want to get the deep mulch off. And that's simply because if our soil cools down too much, it will actually dissuade our vegetables from wanting to grow. So the trick here is we have a summertime vegetable garden where the soil is hot and it's gradually going to cool off. So we kind of, you know, shield it now. And then, you know, after September, I always say September, although we can get hot days in September, you know, take a little bit off. And then certainly by October or the end of September, October, you know, we're being a bit careful about mulching things, but making sure we're keeping it watered, because once you take that mulch off, things are going to dry out pretty quickly if you're not getting any rain. But in the summertime, if our soil's over 85, your seeds aren't going to germinate. So we're going to cool that soil down is a main thing, because you may be looking at that thing thinking, well, why isn't it growing? Why isn't it growing? It may simply be because, you know, the soil's too warm. Also on the vegetables, I think one of those vegetables I forgot to mention is carrots. Carrots down here are a huge thing to grow in the fall time. In Northern Virginia, I didn't encounter a lot of people growing carrots. Down here, a lot of people grow carrots. Actually, they don't even grow spring carrots down here. They grow fall carrots. But, you know, carrots is something else that you could grow as a vegetable. And you want to be really careful about the maturity date on carrots, because carrots can have a pretty varied maturity date. So if you are interested in growing carrots, pay attention to your maturity date, but it is possible to grow carrots as well. I don't know why I didn't have that on my list. Maybe because my spring carrots always turn out awful. So we got to care for all this stuff, right? Or some of this stuff. I'm not going to say all this stuff. I guess by the time I get done planting, it's all that stuff. And then I'm like, why did I plant all that? And then I remember, because I want to eat it. So, you know, hot summer sun. We get these little tender seedlings that come up, you know, and they're like, oh, please give me some water, give me a little bit of sun. And then, you know, we get a 95-degree day and they're going to be, you know, they're going to be toast. So we really need to watch those seedlings pretty carefully during this time of year, and especially into September. We get that intense summer heat. We have high heat and windy conditions. We're going to be ready to watch those seedlings and make sure that they don't wilt. And again, be prepared to mulch with straw or shredded newspapers or something else initially, and then be ready to take that off. You can also use row cover. Now it's a lightweight row cover. This isn't the frost cover that may come down the line if you're trying to protect something. We're using what they call insect protection, lightweight row cover. If you're not familiar with row cover, I highly suggest Googling row cover and finding out what it's all about and what it does. It can shield your vegetables, and I actually use row cover for my vegetables, my fall vegetables initially, just simply because I know it's going to get hot down here. Now later on in the season, when we start to get into frost and we start to get those 20-degree temperatures and such, then we're into frost protection, which is a heavier weight row cover. Also consider planting seeds in the cover of other tall summer vegetables. There may be vegetables you just like, oh, I'm just going to let those go, and I'll plant my seeds so that they're in somewhat shaded location during the heat of August and early September. And then also you can consider shade cloth. You can buy shade cloth online for vegetables. Oftentimes you need some kind of hoop arrangement because you're going to put the shade cloth over a hoop. With row cover, you can kind of lay it over your seedlings. It doesn't generally damage them, but shade cloth tends to be a little bit heavier, and that should go over some hoops. I use shade cloth actually during the summertime because the sun can get pretty intense down here. And I use PVC. I go to the big box store and buy PVC and bend it, and then I put my shade cloth over it. Remember to keep your seedlings moist. That summer sun will dry them out. So, you know, initially that fall garden, we should be out there when we've got something planted. We should be out there, you know, watching our water activity, and then a little light mulch until we get to those cooler season temperatures, which come generally about mid-September or so. Insects. Can I just tell you, insects. Insects will haunt you every season. It doesn't matter. So again, use your row cover. I plant my things. You know, I do kohlrabi, I do turnips, I do lettuce, I don't know, collards, I do collards. And immediately upon planting them, I install row cover over them. Because when we're talking broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower and turnips and things of this nature, the pests that visit our brassicas, they're in a group called brassicas, the insect pests are actually worse in the fall. So I highly advise that if you're going to grow fall vegetables in the brassica family, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, turnips, collards, that you invest in row cover and get that row cover installed as soon as you plant those plants or those seeds or transplants. That will just save you a whole lot of hassle of needing to deal with the pests, which will come. They will find you eventually. And then install bigger fencing. Remember, we've got those big critters out there. It's time to get fat and happy. So they're on the lookout. And I took my dog out for a walk in front of my house down the road this morning. And I'll be darned if there weren't 10 deer which crossed the road in front of me. I'm like, oh, heads up on that. I've got to protect some of these things in my front landscaping beds because they're going to munch them down. We've got a fenced backyard, so I don't have to worry about my vegetable garden. But this is when the bigger critters are also looking for a munchie, and they're looking to get fat and happy. Kale, your Swiss chard, your bunching onions, and carrots, they'll survive a winter if it's not a harsh winter if you apply a mulch cover of 8 inches and you apply that after Thanksgiving. You can actually overwinter those things and then take them as you need them. If you get a lot of snow, you may want to mark where it's at. But from what I understand, Northern Virginia hasn't had a lot of snow recently. So, but if you do get one of those big blizzards, drops 30 inches or something, you may want to mark where you've planted those things so you can go out and get them. So now is question time. So what questions do we have, Dina?
All Right. Well, first, I have a message from Norma Lee that says to say hi and that they miss you very much.
Tell Normally I miss her, or if like Normally could probably hear me, I miss you guys. I miss Northern Virginia terribly, but I'm getting used to my new home.
Another question I have is, somebody said, I'm familiar with the VCE publication she's talking about with the planting dates. Do the late season planting dates in that publication take into account the fall delay?
They should. They should. Actually, if you read through the publication, I believe that they have, I think they take into account, but I'm not going to say that 100%, but I know that they talk about the fall delay in that publication. So I would review the publication. And I guess I did review it quickly, but I wasn't looking for that specific question. Um, I think the best thing to do is the particular seed packet or transplant that you're using, look at the maturity dates and then add your 14 days and then count back from your average first frost, which in Northern Virginia, and that would give you an accurate count. The publication, the planting guide that VCE has out, can sometimes be a little sporadic in its recommendations. So I think the best thing to do is to take your days to harvest, add 14 days, count back from October 15th.
Excellent. Normally, also, when you were speaking about, I don't know which slide this was, but she said, I agree, broadcasting spinach in the demo garden works best.
I think it was Sharon Harris that I got so frustrated because I love spinach and I could never get it to grow. And I think it was Sharon Harris who said, well, you just need to broadcast it. And then I think normally you jumped on that. And so since then I was just kind of said, broadcast it because it did come up and it did grow.
Let's see. Somebody asked, this is great. Can we access this presentation somewhere later for reference? So I'll let you know now. I'm recording this. It's going to be on our Loudoun County Public Library YouTube channel. I'll also send a link to Jean Fenwick with the Master Gardeners. And if you're not part of the Master Gardeners and you want Denise's handouts, because Jean's already sent them to the Master Gardeners, I'm going to drop my email again in the chat and feel free to email me and I'll send them to you. So I think that answers that question. Let's see if we have any other ones. Any other questions, folks? I'm just double checking. Oh, here's one. How deep should our soil planting medium to be? How deep should our soil planting medium to be for winter veggies?
Okay, so that's a very good question. And it's something I forgot to include. Something was on my head, but I didn't get it on my slides. So when you're planting your seeds for your fall vegetables, you want to plant them at half the recommended, no, not half. You want to plant them at 2 times the recommended depth that the seed packet tells you to do. So if the seed packet tells you to plant them at, let's say, 1/4 inch, into the soil, you're going to plant them at 1/2 inch. And that again goes to because the soil is so warm that you actually want to get them deeper. In the springtime, where the soil is cool and eventually it warms up, then we want to go with what the seed packet. But because the soil is hot and it's warm, you want to plant them at 2 times the depth that the seed packet tells you.
Excellent. I'm not seeing any additional questions right now. Let me just give people one more minute. I'm putting let's see. Oh, and then the same person said, how about transplants?
The transplants are going as normal. If you're putting in a transplant though, I highly recommend that you mulch immediately. When we're talking August, in early September, I would immediately get some straw over that soil to help keep the tender roots and help cool the soil.
And I got another one. Thank you for mentioning some of the lesser known yummy vegetables that you mentioned, kohlrabi being an example. I also love the greens from radishes and from beets, fresher tasting like old-fashioned spinach.
Yeah. And I'm actually growing, I grew in the springtime here, I actually grew beets specifically for the greens because there wasn't enough time before the hot weather set in to actually get the beets, especially when you're dealing with sand, because sand gets hot a lot quicker than clay does. But I grow beets just for the beet greens in the springtime because that's what I can get to maturity before my particular issues come into play.
All right. Any other questions, folks? Just doing a quick
Sure.
look here.
Question away. Yeah, we don't have quite the kind of Master Gardener program down here that we had in Northern Virginia. I miss the Master Gardener program. There were so many different things you could do, but we're living in the country and things are a little calmer down here. So when Denise gets an opportunity to talk, she does.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah.
I am just looking up. I want to share the next program. I'm just double checking my dates
Sure.
here. So, all right. Let me go here. Here I am. Our next Master Gardener program is going to be on September 7th. Same time, 7 o'clock, and we're going to be doing a program on Build a Backyard Bird Oasis. So
Oh,
please join us. Jean Fenwick with the Master Gardeners shares the link with the Master Gardeners, but it will also be available on our library website, which is library.loudoun.gov. So please join us for next month's program. I got a couple more questions. Somebody's
sure.
asking, what about beans?
Beans, too late. Beans are a summer vegetable. And unless you got them into the ground in July, now you can do a second planting of beans, but they really, really need to be at maturity really by the end of September because they're a warm season crop. I know it's sad. We love our beans.
And then I have somebody else that made a comment. Try New Zealand spinach during the summer. They are heat tolerant.
Okay. I will. I may give that a shot. I'm always looking for greens during the summertime, although I love my summer vegetables. But greens are good.
All right. I think we're all set, Denise.
All
Thank you
right,
so
great.
much
Well, thank you for
presenting.
joining me.
Yeah.
I'm glad you listened to me, so my husband doesn't have to listen to me all the time.
No, it was a great presentation. Thanks for
All right.
joining us. We appreciate it. And we'll see everybody next month. Oh, Jean says, Denise, hearing your enthusiasm is always a delight.
I know. He gets excited about our vegetables.
All right, everybody. We'll see
All
you
right.
next month. Thank you, Denise. We appreciate it. And everybody have a great night.